The test is in 4 sections. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Section 1. Section 1. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5.
Hi, Bob.
Hi, Harry. Where's Jill? I really need her. She's the brainy one.
Me too, but she's always late.
I think that's her. I'd recognize her footsteps anywhere.
Good morning, boys. Sorry I'm a bit late. I was photocopying some things that you might find useful for reviewing for the exams. I know you missed those lectures. Been waiting long? The traffic is so heavy.
Nah, just got here.
Good. Okay, but I'm really busy, so why don't we start? I know you wanted these photocopies, but what else?
This is a bit embarrassing, Jill, but Bob and I are really worried about these exams. I haven't prepared for them, and we only have 2 weeks. My parents will kill me if I don't pass.
Same here. The thing is, you always do so well in exams, and,
Well, we know you know a lot about studying and things, so we thought you might be able to give us a few tips.
A few tips? If you both spent more time with your books and went to classes, you wouldn't need any tips. You think the bar is more important.
yeah, well, but we'd be really grateful if you know.
We really need your help, Jill.
Okay. I know you two guys. The first thing you have to do is organize your time. You're both so disorganized, and you don't have your priorities right. Having fun is always more important.
I know. But I'm really going to do what you tell us, Jill. Got no choice.
Me too.
I can only make a few suggestions. Really simple ones. Basic stuff. Obvious. But it's obvious you two don't have a clue. Ready for Mummy's talk?
I guess so.
Yeah.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10.
Organize your time. Set aside a time for 40 minutes for exercise every day, and stick to it. Is that too difficult?
I guess not.
And no going partying or to the pub every night, okay?
This is sounding difficult.
Okay, fail your exams, then tell your mom and dad.
No, we're listening, Jill.
Right. No parties or drinking for 3 weeks. Agree?
Yeah, guess so. What else?
As soon as I've gone, write down a timetable. Eating time, exercise time, sleeping time. We've only got 1 or 2 classes left before the exams, so most of the rest of the time you can spend reviewing, but you have to stick to it.
We will, but then what?
Don't try to learn or review everything in one go. And take a 5-minute break every hour. Get up and walk around. You should know all this.
I suppose I do, but I never actually did it.
Same here.
And one last thing. For 5 or 10 minutes every hour, are you going to review together?
Guess so.
For the last few minutes, tell each other what you've learned in the past 40 minutes. That really helps it stick in your memory.
That is the end of Section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to Section 2. Section 2. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Good afternoon. Members of the Green Forest Golf and Country Club, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Parker Education Research Company, it is my pleasure to present you with the results of our feasibility study and recommendations for the facilities of the new private school that you are considering having built in Green Forest. First, the green light, our feasibility study. It shows that building the school makes economic sense. It would be a good investment. May I briefly explain how we came to this conclusion, how we conducted our study? There are just over 7,500 households in Green Forest and a population of 31,000. If you look at the graph on the screen, you will see that the average annual income of these households last year was £83,000 a year, which is far above the national average of £41,000. We did a random survey of 10% of the 3,200 families with a household income of over $50,000 and found that they had an average of 0.33 children between the ages of 8 and 12, the age of local children who would be most likely to attend the school, which, if the project is approved, will open in 2 years' time. So this means there are about 1,000 children in Green Forest who will be of the right age, and with parents who could probably afford it, to attend the proposed new private school. After explaining the concept, we found that just over 1/3 of these parents are very enthusiastic about sending their children to the type of school that you have in mind. The rest were not sure or completely satisfied with the state schools. We did not do a survey in the 2 nearby towns, but seeing that they also have a high percentage of quite wealthy people, roughly the same demographics, and have no nearby top-class schools to which to send their children, we are confident that at least 50, probably near 100 pupils could be attracted from these towns as students when the school opens. This means there are at least 300 local students whose parents would be very keen on sending them to the proposed new school. This would be enough to make the school break even in the second year. As new classrooms and other facilities were added in the second and third years, especially 2 residences, one for male and one for female students from elsewhere in the country and overseas, then the economic prospects look even better. I mentioned facilities. and I know you have been discussing this a lot among yourselves. Our survey shows that there are several essential facilities that almost all the people we questioned would require before sending their children here. I will not list them in any order of importance. They are all seen to be very important. The first is a good language lab. Very few of the parents we spoke to are fluent in a foreign language and do not want their children to be the same. It seems most of them mention the word globalization and see the importance of foreign languages, and not just French and other European languages. Many of them mention Chinese.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
Another essential is good sports facilities, including an Olympic-size indoor swimming pool and a well-equipped gym. A lot of the parents were overweight. I guess they don't want their kids to get in the same way. 2 multiple-use pitches, one for rugby and soccer, the other for field hockey and athletics, would be required. Fortunately, the land for these would not be a problem, as the governors and members of this golf and country club have agreed that the golf practice range is far bigger than needed, and part of it could be used for these outdoor sports. In addition, the location is ideal, right next to the proposed site of the school itself. Another, and very obvious requirement, is that the school have a state-of-the-art computer study center. It would not have to be big enough to accommodate more than, say, 10% of the students at any one time, because virtually all of them have their own computers at home. But no computer games, unless they are educational, was a frequent response to the computer studies question. I know that several of you work for large computer companies, so maybe you could use your influence to keep costs down and quality high. A cafeteria? Interestingly enough, one thing some people mentioned, perhaps it's a bit early to worry about this, was that they would not want their children to have access to fast food. Other things, all of which are seen as essential, and that we have included in the budget, are a good-sized main hall, with a large stage for school drama productions, etc., and good facilities for music, pianos, everything for a school orchestra, all the things many of the parents didn't have when they were young.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 3. Section 3. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 26.
Good morning, everybody. As most of you know, I'm Professor Rosemary Parkinson, and as I'm sure you all know, else you wouldn't be here, I'm going to give a talk on good study habits and developing a study plan. First of all, why do I think such a talk will be helpful to you? After all, you are all first-year university students, although I see some familiar faces here, so I guess some of you have been at our university for much more than a week or so. But the point is, you've all been students for 12 years or more, so surely you know all about studying. Well, it seems rather strange, but all of us spend years at school learning maths, physics, chemistry, history, languages, all sorts of things. But how many of us have ever been to a class where they try to teach us how to learn, how to study, in the most efficient and enjoyable way? I say enjoyable because learning things we don't enjoy learning, that we think we have no interest in, is such a bore. But in fact, many studies show that most of us enjoy studying most things if we do it right. If we study properly in an active way that constantly uses our creativity, that makes us excited about what is coming next, that gives us the satisfaction of having solved a problem. How many of you know people who hate studying but love doing crosswords or playing computer games that challenge their minds and their reflexes? Lots of you, I'm sure. Well, one objective is to learn to enjoy studying in the same way we enjoy those crosswords and computer games. Okay, we'll come back to that later. Now, I want to discuss a few basics. 1. Regular exercise. Countless studies show that regular physical exercise, say 40 minutes or so, 5 days a week of jogging, fast walking, weight training, tennis, whatever you enjoy, puts you in a more positive frame of mind and also increases creativity and memory for hours after the exercise. Other important things are to eat good, healthy food, get enough sleep, and try not to spend too much time and money in the student bar. There's nothing worse than trying to learn something or solve a problem than when you have a hangover. So, as the Romans used to say, mens sana in corpore sano, a healthy mind in a healthy body. Right, now we're all going to keep fit and healthy. What about the studying? First, you must work out the times that you will use for study. When I say study, I mean all the schoolwork, writing essays, reading, etc., that you do out of class. Be realistic. Don't plan to spend 60 hours a week on it. It's too much for most of us. Set aside 1 or 2 blocks of time, each of, say, 2 or 2.5 hours a day, that are your study time. As I say, be realistic. Don't set yourself such an ambitious goal that you will never stick to it. And it's also a good idea to leave 1 day a week, Sunday perhaps, completely free, so you can relax, and occasionally do some schoolwork at those times when it builds up a bit. That's time settled. Now for place. We are creatures of habit. We do things better when we do them in places that we associate with a particular activity, in this case, studying.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
So it's best to try and set aside a quiet place. Perhaps your bedroom, a study if you have one, which is where you study. When the weather is nice, it could be outdoors. Nothing is nicer than reading and thinking about that novel you have to read for English Literature 101 on a quiet, grassy bank by a stream on a sunny day. And we mustn't forget the library. Most of us find that studying, surrounded by the learning of centuries, is inspiring, as though studying is the only proper thing to do in a library. Okay, time, place, what next? It is questions. Before you set out to read something, always ask yourself, what questions do I want and expect to be answered in this chapter or this paper? Don't simply start reading and hoping to absorb information like a sponge. Give the information somewhere to go, like little hooks in your brain to hang it on. These hooks are the questions you've thought of. And don't try to do too much at a time. After, say, 40 or 50 minutes, put the book down and tell yourself what you've learnt, what questions have been answered, what it means. Spend a few minutes on this and take a short walk while you're doing it.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 4. Section 4. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Good evening. Good to see so many people here to learn about the fascinating civilization of the Aztecs. By the way, is the microphone working? You can hear okay at the back? Good. Let's go back to 1519 AD. Anyone know what happened in that year? Right. Hernan Cortes landed on that part of Central America that is today known as Mexico. He expected to find gold, and he did. What he did not expect to find, however, was the great Aztec civilization. Aztec legend said they originated in the plains of northwestern Mexico and slowly migrated southward. When they arrived at Lake Texcoco in 1325, they founded their great capital, Tenochtitlan, on the site of what is now Mexico City. The Aztecs developed a complex society and governmental structure, at the head of which was the emperor. They made many scientific advances, especially in the areas of astronomy and medicine. They also had a complicated religion, and interest in the arts, agriculture, and social conditions occupied much of their time. Let's talk about their remarkable achievements in some of these areas. You cannot do much if you don't have food to eat. So let's first take a look at their farming practices. The land that the Aztecs farmed was not fertile enough to grow enough food to support the growing population, so they were forced to invent methods to increase productivity, including irrigation, fertilizer, and even building terraces on hills to protect soil from running off, like we see today in China, the Philippines, and many other parts of the world. But one thing we don't see was their very original idea of chinapas, spelt C-H-I-N-A-P-A-S. Chinapas were floating gardens built on swamps. Actually, they were quite simple to make. First, canals were dug through the marshes and swamps. Then, mud from the canals was placed on mats woven from weeds and straw. These mats were quite big, maybe 5 or 6 meters long and 2 across. Trees were then planted in the bed of the swamp at the corners of each mat. The trees took root, and the chinapas were held firmly in place. The Aztecs used these floating gardens to plant their maize, corn, and also vegetables like beans, chili peppers, avocados, squash, and tomatoes. The Aztecs were very advanced in some ways, but they didn't use animals or plows to help them work the land. In fact, they didn't even have the wheel. No problem. The soil on the chinapas was soft enough that pointed sticks were all they needed to plant crops on them. But the Aztecs were much more than imaginative gardeners. They made great advances in the sciences, especially astronomy. I'm sure many of you have heard of the Aztecs' calendar stone. It took them 52 years, from 1427 to 1479, to build the calendar stone. It was huge, a massive piece of rock 3 feet thick, 12 feet in diameter, and weighing about 24 tons, on which they carved pictographs for the days and months of the Aztec calendar. This showed just how advanced the Aztecs were in the science of astronomy. It makes me think of the clean air they enjoyed in those days, when they could see all the stars shining so brightly in the night sky. They would have had a big problem doing this in most parts of the world nowadays. But back to the calendar stone. It had 18 months, each of 20 days, namely 360 days made 1 year. But they had long before worked out that there are 365 days in a year. So they added 5 days, which they called the nemantemi, or sacrificial days, to get 365. Remember, this was 103 years before the Gregorian calendar that we use today. Very sophisticated, those Aztec astronomers. And they were not only clever astronomers. The Aztecs made great advances in medicine. At the time, many Europeans looked down on the herbal medicine of the Aztecs as a heathen practice, just like they used to look down on traditional Chinese or African medicine. But in fact, Aztec doctors could do more than even the best doctors in Europe. Their medicine was primarily based on spiritual healing and herbal healing. Spiritual because they believed many illnesses were caused by such things as an angry God or bad birth signs. So their first step in treating an illness was always prayer and sometimes animal sacrifice. But they also used herbal medicine and concentrated much of their medical science on finding out what herbs could do, just like the ancient Chinese doctors. So, over generations, the Aztecs accumulated a vast knowledge of the herbs in the world around them and the medicinal properties of each one. One difference with traditional Chinese medicine is that the Aztecs concentrated more on curing the symptoms of a disease than getting at the cause of the disease. They felt that if a god or goddess wished to make them ill, then they could do nothing about the root cause, namely a god. If the medicine worked, it meant that the gods approved of the patient getting well again.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers. That is the end of the listening test.